Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Paul Clark, Regional President of PNC and a proud member of the City Club. I'm pleased to introduce today's forum, a panel conversation focused on the importance of high-quality preschool. Over the last decade, access to high-quality preschool gained momentum as one of the most important education reforms to bolster in-school outcomes and lifelong success. Research going back decades show us that individuals who receive high-quality preschool are 4 times more likely to have been graduated from a 4-year college, 50% more likely to have consistent employment in their late 20s, and have lower chronic health risks such as coronary heart disease and obesity in adulthood. In short, research indicates that individuals given a strong foundation in high-quality early childhood education are less likely to be a drain on the system and more likely to be the kind of citizens we all want to see, employed, paying taxes, raising children of their own, and contributing to the community and the economy. This is why communities across the country are investing in early childhood education, and it's why we now have 2 programs here in northeastern Ohio, Cuyahoga County's Invest in Children and Cleveland's Pre for CLE, both of which are focused on ensuring every child in the communities can attend a high-quality preschool. Cleveland is not the first to tackle high-quality preschool expansion. One of the first communities to embrace high-quality universal preschool is Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's a national model, and in fact, the whole state has had universal pre-K for 20 years. Today, we're going to hear about the impact it has had and then discuss how that can and should inform what we do here in Greater Cleveland. Our program today is a little different than our standard forum. First, we'll hear a short presentation from Georgetown University professor, Dr. Deborah Phillips, on the impact of universal pre-K in Tulsa. Then Sounds of Ideas host and producer Michael McIntyre will moderate a panel with local experts on early childhood education from Pre for CLE and Invest in Children. Finally, we'll have our traditional City Club Q&A. So let's begin. Dr. Deborah Perkins was the first executive director, excuse me, I know a Deborah Perkins, but this isn't who I'm introducing. Dr. Deborah Phillips, excuse me, was the first executive director of the Board on Children, Youth, and Families of the National Research Council and the Institute of Medicine, and served as the study director for the board's report, From Neurons to Neighborhoods, the Science of Early Child Development. She has also served as president of the Foundation for Child Development, director of the Child Care Information Services at the National Association for the Education of Young Children, and Congressional Science Fellow on the staff of California Congressman George Miller. She's currently a professor in the university, in the Department of Psychology at Georgetown University. So ladies and gentlemen, members and friends of the City Club, please join me in welcoming Dr. Deborah Phillips.
I had a boyfriend once whose last name was Perkins. You surprised me for a moment. I thought, did I just blank out for the last few years? So I'm really, really honored to be here, and even more so now that I've had a chance to learn a little bit about the City Club. And I'm certainly not Karl Rove or Cory Booker, but to be in the same ranks is quite an honor. It's especially meaningful to me, actually, that you've invited somebody to talk about preschool education in a nonpartisan forum, because preschool is definitely a nonpartisan issue. We're talking about the lives of young children. And in fact, in Oklahoma, the main champions for preschool education have been Republicans. So, and we're very proud of that. So thank you also for giving it that kind of a forum, because it's very meaningful. It was also wonderful to open up your lovely report on the City Club and see Marion Wright Edelman on the inside flap. I had the honor of working with her when I was quite a bit younger, and so again, to share a forum with her is especially personally meaningful to me. The most exciting and worrisome evidence about what is at stake regarding your fabulous investments in preschool education in the Cleveland area is emerging at the intersection of neuroscience and developmental science. To do these here. Oh, there we go. The evidence tells us that the early years are a time of uniquely rapid development of the neurological systems that drive lifelong health and development. We are literally laying down either a sturdy or a fragile foundation in the early years of life for all that gets layered on top of them as we grow into adulthood and beyond. We know that early learning confers value on acquired skills. We know that early mastery of competencies makes learning at later ages more efficient, easier, and thus more rewarding for everyone involved. And we know that early intervention lowers the cost of later investments. And a great example of this from the preschool area is that if all 4-year-olds have wonderful experiences in preschool and elsewhere and arrive ready to learn at the kindergarten door, you're making that kindergarten teacher's job much easier because she can then concentrate on teaching all of them what they're supposed to learn in kindergarten and not having to catch up a lot of them while the others sit there and wait and lose the benefits of preschool education, actually. We know that this developmental process is exquisitely attuned to the surrounding environment of the young child, and especially in the environment of relationships at home and in school and elsewhere that surround the young child. The brain is literally designed to greedily recruit information from the interactions and environments and experiences that surround it while the child is growing up. But the brain is ecumenical about what it recruits. So it takes in the bad stuff just as happily and readily as it takes in the good stuff to shape its developing architecture and chemistry, or what we refer to as the hardware and software of the developing brain. And this suggests that really all environments that surround the young child are early interventions, even though we pay attention to some as early interventions and make sure they are of very high quality, and in other cases we kind of just roll the dice and hope for the best. What is new about the evidence is that we have a much deeper understanding of what this now implies about the importance of early education as a result of having much deeper knowledge about the brain systems that are most profoundly affected by the early environments that surround the child. And they are those, precisely those, that have the most powerful impacts on young children's emerging capacities to learn. And this takes us to the literature, fascinating literature, coming out of epigenetics now, about how adversity gets under the skin to affect the developing human. Adversity in this case meaning poverty, which is what we're seeing in this picture, but also sustained negative peer interactions that too many young children encounter, unresponsive parent and teacher interactions that too many young children encounter. This in turn leads children to experience sustained or toxic stress, which produces very damaging wear and tear on the areas of the brain that are most critical for early learning. And what you see in this picture are the parts of the brain that are referred to as the prefrontal cortex, sitting right up here, and the hippocampus, which is buried deep within our brain. And you can see very readily that a child who's subjected to stress has far fewer connections between the neurons in their brain, and therefore a far less efficient early brain development coming out of stress. The question then is, what specifically do these brain regions control? What does stress take offline? It takes off executive functionings. Executive functionings are those capacities that allow us to follow directions, remember instructions to achieve a goal. In other words, come into the classroom, hang up your coat, grab a book from the book corner, and come and sit in circle time. A child who can do that versus a child who hangs up his coat and then thinks, what is it that I'm supposed to do, and wanders aimlessly around the room. The ability to resist temptations and control impulses, to pay attention and when it's important to shift attention to something new, to be able to do so nimbly and flexibly. The prefrontal cortex also controls the ability to alert to mistakes and to receive and incorporate corrective feedback, obviously something that is very important for early learning. It affects our ability to regulate our emotions, fear, anger, frustration, also excitement. It affects how we perceive and respond to social threat. So for some children, a little bump in the hallway by a backpack becomes a personal threat, and that child gets revved up, ready to do something about it. For another child, it's just an accident on behalf of a slightly clumsy child. And those perceptions make a huge difference in a child's comfort and happiness and ability to learn in school. It also affects our immune functioning, where when we're on stress mode, we set aside lifelong health and development in order to be able to respond in the moment. And in fact, there is evidence of lower antibody levels on behalf of children who are spending day out and day in very poor quality childcare programs. These things, of course, affect learning and development. It is in the early care and education settings that children encounter earlier and earlier in life that I refer to as a crucible, because this is where children first encounter increasing demands on their executive functioning skills, increasing demands on their language skills, which newer evidence is also demonstrating are undermined. Those parts of the brain are undermined by stress. Their first encounters with a peer group, very challenging for young children. Their first exposure to illness, often. Teachers, when you ask them what they care about most in young children when they enter that kindergarten door, is that they know how to sit still and follow directions and get along with other children so that they are able to teach them. So now I'm going to take you to Oklahoma. I love Oklahoma. Oklahoma, as you know, sits in the middle of the country. It is a very red state. It is 49th in the United States in education spending. But the crown in its hat, the glory in its crown, what it's very proud of, its preschool program. In fact, there was a legislator just this last month who tried to take it out of the school funding formula, and that conversation lasted for about a week before everybody came to him and said, no, you don't touch funds for preschool education in Oklahoma. So Oklahoma established its universal preschool education program in 1998. It is funded through the school aid formula. So it is not a separate line item appropriation. It is not dependent on donations. It is therefore a very sustainable, dependable funding stream, which is crucial to an effective early education system. Primary schools are the primary providers, but it is a mixed delivery system, just as you have here. The partnerships that the system has with Head Start programs and community-based childcare programs are established through the public schools. Every lead teacher in every kind of program that gets Oklahoma preschool funding must have a lead teacher who has a BA degree and is early childhood education certified. They are paid on the same wage scale as K-12 teachers, so there is no disincentive for a teacher who wants to work with a 4-year-old to go work with a 5-year-old and make 20% more with a BA degree, which is what happens nationally in this country. So what have we seen when we go inside and look inside the door of Tulsa's preschool classrooms? We see very high quality early education. The class scale is an observational assessment of mostly focusing on teacher-child interactions and peer interactions in the classroom, the heart and soul of quality. And a 7 is the highest score you can get, and a 0 is obviously the lowest score. Tulsa classrooms are the blue bars. The red bars represent classrooms from 11 other states that represent about 90% of preschool classrooms in this country. So you can see that Tulsa, on each dimension of early learning, and I'll tell you briefly what these are, gets a higher bar compared to other preschool programs. So productivity has to do with how well the teacher manages classroom time to optimize time that children are learning math, literacy, social-emotional skills. formats has to do with how teachers actually provide content to children in ways that maximizes their enjoyment of learning, engagement, sense of discovery, so that the children are in the driver's seat in early learning. Concept development has to do with the difference between giving children sort of rote order lessons, the kind of sit down, shut up, listen, and do your worksheet kind of education, as compared to instruction that really stimulates curiosity, higher order learning skills. And feedback has to do with the difference between simply corrective feedback, you got it right, you got it wrong, and feedback that expands learning and understanding. We also looked at the amount of time that teachers spend over the course of a typical day on various academic subject matter. In this case is what I'm sharing with you. And you can see again that in Tulsa, there is much more time spent on early literacy activities, but also on math and on science. So they are very serious about giving these children substantive but really fun content. And I wish I had a little video. There have been some made recently where they actually film inside Tulsa classroom, and you can see the children are having a blast. This is not like pressurized early education at all. So what does this quality reap? It reaps very strong benefits. The way to read this picture is that the number of months ahead that children who have had preschool education in Tulsa are relative to children who have not yet had preschool education in Tulsa, okay? So they are 9 months ahead on a test of letter word identification. This is a standardized achievement test used all over the country. Spelling 7 months ahead of children who have not experienced Tulsa pre-K. 5 months ahead on early math learning, which is what the applied problems test captures. Here you see the same metric broken down by income. So you've got free lunch kids, the lowest income kids, in the blue bar. The yellow bar is children who get reduced lunch, and the red bar are children who pay for their lunches. Because it's a universal program, we're able to look across the income spectrum. So you can see that the strongest impacts are on the lowest income children, but children across the income spectrum illustrate significant impacts on early learning of this program. They are often in classrooms together. This shows you impacts on dual language learners. The dual language learners are in yellow. The non-dual language learners who have had pre-K are in the blue, and so you can see we get a big whammy for the dual language learners. We think that's because they're learning English, and they are also learning content, so they really do get a double whammy. We also asked teachers to rate the children's social-emotional development. And what they told us in their ratings, they did not know which kid had gone to preschool and which one hadn't, that those who'd gone to preschool showed greater engagement in learning, and they address this in terms of children showing apathy, timidity, lots and lots of attention seeking, and attentiveness. And the children who were in the Tulsa preschool program scored greater on all of those measures. Many people, actually myself included, I have to say, believe that it is these dimensions that are going to be the crux of the answer to the fade out versus sustained impact questions, because a lot of what's happening here is that we are inducting children into the role of a happy, engaged, motivated student. And that is what seems to be happening in Tulsa. So let me turn to this question of, the ratio. Yeah. We have worked with an economist to look at the cost-benefit ratio of specifically of the program in Tulsa. And just very quickly, we are getting these $3 to $4 saved for every dollar spent based on looking at the relationship between early achievement and adult earnings. So this is very systematic evidence, and you can see that the impacts in the gray bar for the low-income kids are a little bit greater. The impacts for the Part Day program are a little bit greater, just because it costs less to provide a Part Day program. Okay. And this is this is looking at the impacts of going to pre-K versus other dimensions of early development as it affects gains in achievement test scores. So the red bar is showing you the difference between children who had pre-K and children who did not, as it impacts achievement test scores in kindergarten, and you can see the red bars are very high. The differential is huge. The other bars capture other things. So just quickly, the blue bar, for example, compares children whose mothers have a college degree with children whose mothers have less than a high school degree. And so that differential isn't even as high as the differential of children going to preschool education. So a very smart early investment. All right, so quickly turning to the fade-out question. There are two parts to this question. One is the boost that children are getting from preschool education strong enough? Is it really building a sturdy foundation? And secondly, what is happening in K-12 education? Is it sustaining or undermining that early preschool education burst? So we have looked at this in Tulsa up through third grade. And we found some evidence of sustained impacts, not comprehensive evidence of sustained impacts, but where we saw it was in math learning. This is the state achievement test data. So for math and for boys and for math, and even though the bar is lower for the free lunch kids, it's actually a stronger impact on the math learning of free lunch kids is where we saw sustained impacts of the preschool program. Stay tuned. I'd be happy to come back in a year and tell you about what we found at 8th grade, which is the data we're now crunching because we have followed these children to 8th grade and are looking at test scores, grades, attendance, grade retention, special education placement, and suspensions. So those data will be forthcoming. So quickly to summarize, 3 take-home messages. First, the brain is designed to adapt based on experience. All environments, as far as the brain is concerned, are early interventions. What children know and can do at every age is the platform, stair-step fashion. Development is cumulative on what subsequent learning is able to build. Never too late to offer strong learning opportunities, but the odds of changing paths forward into adulthood are stronger if you start early. Second, high-quality pre-K programs do build brains. They provide the dependable, stable, nurturing relationships that buffer children from the very detrimental impacts of stress on the brain and the body. They build early academic skills and executive functioning. They can have enduring impacts on consequential outcomes, and they make economic sense. Take-home message 3, what does it take? This is the big gorilla in the room. It takes recruiting and retaining an educated, dedicated teaching workforce. Teachers are the raw material of quality early education. These are teachers who embed children in age-appropriate, intentional instruction focused on specific skills like math and literacy and social-emotional development. This is what makes education the engine of opportunity in this country, and that is just as true at the preschool level. They offer all children responsive, contingent, supportive interactions throughout the day. This is what protects brains from the consequences of stress. And the teachers themselves are supported with strong professional development and coaching, and they are valued. And that takes me back to recruitment and retention and also to compensation. So I will end there with these 2 little cowgirl and cowboy in Tulsa saying thank you to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Phillips, or is it Dr. Perkins Phillips?
I like my current husband.
Okay. I'd like to welcome you all to the panel discussion part of our program today. I'm Mike McIntyre from IdeaStream and The Plain Dealer, who along with Cleveland.com have had an initiative, a collaboration for this entire year called the First 2,000 Days, looking at the importance of just this type of thing in terms of setting young people up for success. That's something also that's sponsored by PNC Bank, and I appreciate Paul Clark suggesting that we'll be spending this time talking about the Tulsa model and this research and how it can inform the way we approach early education in Northeast Ohio. And we're going to do that with my guest directly to my left. We're going to start with Katie Kelly. She's Executive Director of Cleveland's Pre-4-CLE. It's a partnership between the Cleveland schools and 30 community organizations. Kelly is with us. And Dr. Rebecca Dorman, director of Cuyahoga County's initiative Invest in Children. She oversees the county's universal pre-K program that launched 9 years ago. So Paul already asked the question, how does this research inform what we do locally? Kelly?
So this research is critical to everything we do, both through Pre-4-CLE and through the county's universal pre-K program. We in this community really value looking at research, looking at best practices, and making sure that our classrooms have the kind of supports that Dr. Phillips is talking about. So highly trained teachers, research-based curricula, and teachers who are really coached to implement that curricula in the highly integrated way, and making sure that they're very interactive with the students. And also family engagement and those pieces that we know really create the strong outcomes for children. So we have, we're building on what the state has put together as far as what quality means and making sure our providers get there. And that's a big part of what Pre-4-CLE is doing, is helping providers take that first big step to be high quality. But then we also want to go further, and we want to make sure that our investments here are really reaching that highest standard that we know are going to create both the short-term and the long-term outcomes for children.
Rebecca Dorman, how are we using this kind of solid research?
Sure. Well, Oklahoma, as you heard, has really been a pioneer in this area. And when Cuyahoga County decided that we were going to create our own universal pre-kindergarten program, we certainly looked to Tulsa and Oklahoma as a leader, looked at the best practices there in the research, and so you'll see that the elements, most of those elements, were put into our local UPK model. In particular, I would point to the curriculum and the coaching that goes on in the classroom with teachers. And the feedback that we get from the UPK teachers is how helpful it is to have it's sort of like a cheerleader coach with you, not there to criticize, not there to, there's no negative side to it, but just to encourage you to put another set of eyes in the classroom and really help you continuously build quality. So we're all about quality isn't something you attain, it's something you continually are working on for kids.
I heard a murmur go throughout the room when Dr. Phillips mentioned the amount of money that pre-K teachers make in Tulsa, and that a year later you're not making much less than somebody who would teach somebody that's just a year older. And obviously that resonated with the crowd. So this stuff isn't cheap. You have to pay teachers. You have to have smaller classrooms for high quality pre-K. So how about the money? Cuyahoga County has put $10 million in 2016 into an initiative to expand pre-K access and availability. More money needs to be raised, and that's going on right now too, through the philanthropic community and the business community. Mm-hmm. So what about that? What about paying the bills for this?
So I think the better way we want to talk about it is that it's not expensive, but that we get huge dividends, and we're talking about the future of our community, and it's an, return on investment. Is there a price tag that goes with that? Yes, because quality costs money, and I think everyone knows that in anything from shoes to everything that is high quality tends to have a price tag attached to it. The question is it worth it? And I think everything you've heard is, if you think investing in brains is a good investment, there's a lot of research that backs you up and says you're right.
Better than investing in shoes, I think.
Well, it depends on the
especially these shoes. Covered in salt from outside.
And what we're trying to do here in our community is really leverage all of the investments that are already there. So we have funding from the state, we have Head Start dollars, we have a lot of local investments that have been put into this system, and we're trying to build those together and say, let's take what we already have and let's build on that. And that's really the purpose of the new investments from the county and the work that we're doing at Pre-4-CLE, to really build awareness about the importance of this as a critical investment. So when we think about investing in the infrastructure in the city, and we think about investing in our arts community, which are all equally important, we want our community to say, and we are also investing in the future of our community through our young children, and starting to make that investment where we know it's going to have the biggest impact.
Dr. Phillips, Tulsa does a great job, but they're not the only one.
Right.
There are other communities. Tell me
Right.
about other communities that are doing well, and in addition to that, how do they pay for it?
Here you go. Here's some examples.
Okay, well, we're done then. Let's move on.
I just anticipated that question. So there are a growing number of communities all over the country that are taking preschool education very seriously. Sometimes they're in the context of universal programs, sometimes in the context of targeted programs, but they're in Florida, Texas, New Jersey, Boston, Massachusetts. I focused on a few here in this slide that have managed to follow children into elementary school and focused on the longer term, somewhat sustained gains that have come out of preschool education. So you are joining a growing circle of really in the forefront regions of the country, and I commend you for that. You're not alone, and there are, the evidence is very clear, and people are very convinced by the evidence, and finding that when they do in their own communities what has been happening in Oklahoma for a long time, they get the same kinds of results.
You mentioned how state legislators rallied around this funding when one of them in Tulsa and Oklahoma said, let's cut that funding. And you said, no, we don't do that here. So what about elsewhere? When we have good quality preschool, who's paying for it? And in this case, there's a county investment, there's a look for philanthropic endeavors, but what about the public investment or other ways? A tax request?
Right. So most of these programs are funded through government, state and local government, supplemented with federal funds through Title I, Race to the Top. It is largely public funding that is going into these programs. Some pay for the lower income children and then have a sliding fee scale that kicks in for higher income. So there are many, many funding models to look at. The critical thing is, again, this issue of dependability. Because you all know you don't need a program, any kind of program in any area of public policy, that is here one day and gone the next. You need children and families and communities to be able to count on the sustainability of these programs.
Katie Kelly, you just released the first annual report, so you guys are really new at Pre-for-CLE. What does the annual report tell us about the work that's already been done, and what does it tell you about the work that needs to be done?
Sure. Well, we have a big goal for Cleveland, and that's that every child in the city will have access to high quality preschool, the kind of quality that Dr. Phillips is talking about. And so, thank you. Our first benchmark towards that goal was that in the first 2 years, we would create 2,000 new high quality preschool opportunities for the children in our city. And I'm thrilled to say we're more than halfway there. After 1 year, we created 1,200 new preschool opportunities. And while we also worked very hard to reach out to families to tell them why preschool matters and how they find and enroll in a high quality preschool opportunity that's right for them. And so we've put a lot of our energy not only into building and growing the system, but also growing awareness among our families. And that's created tremendous results where our enrollment is up 10%, which beats other cities like San Antonio and Boston in their first years of expanding preschool. So we're charging ahead. We're getting a very enthusiastic response from our community. And we're also seeing that children coming out of our high quality classrooms in the city of Cleveland, 80% of them are on track to be kindergarten ready and to enter that kindergarten room ready to pay attention, ready to learn, and equipped with the skills to really be successful students. And that's such a fundamental part of the Cleveland plan for transforming schools. You know, our leadership realized all of those parts of the plan that go through K-12 can't be successful if children are entering school a year or more behind. And so, you know, we're charging ahead, and we're really excited that this community is so supportive of meeting that goal.
Dr. Rebecca Dorman, you have some folks that might say, I didn't go to a high quality preschool. I didn't start until first grade or kindergarten. They might be the same people that say, I didn't wear a helmet or a seatbelt and I'm still alive today. But they're there. So what about that attitude? Do you have to in any way convince people that high quality pre-K is important? Parents specifically?
You know, I honestly don't think you have to convince parents. In fact, all you have to do is read the stories of the Manhattan elite who are all vying to get into these $40,000 a year preschools because they're convinced It is the first step on the path to success. So I actually think we all want that for every child, the highest quality, and it shouldn't just be the folks who have the ability to pay. I'm really proud that with the Universal Pre-Kindergarten program, we've been able to make it accessible to low and moderate income families. We don't want an accident of what your family income is or your zip code to be the determinant of what your future is. So I think it's just a question of everyone getting together, getting our priorities straight for all kids, the same priorities we have for our own.
I have one other question for Dr. Phillips, and then we're going to be opening up to the City Club Q&A. We've put a lot of weight on pre-K education. It's going to improve outcomes for the entire world. We're going to be great because of it. People won't be in prison. They're going to be highly educated. They'll get jobs. Their health care will be ideal. And I wonder if that's too much to put on this, and what your thoughts are about that.
That's a really intriguing question, and I have a slide for that too.
For those listening on the radio, let's describe that slide.
So I'm guilty of this, right? We do act as if preschool can provide an inoculation for everything that happens subsequently. We do hold preschool education, early education generally, programs for 0 to 5-year-olds broadly to a very high bar in this country. Partly because we don't consider those programs sort of a right for children and families. The proof is placed on them to perform at like an inoculation, like an early intervention that is sort of on the cutting block all of the time. And so those of us who work in this field are constantly having to say, oh, not only will we get children to the kindergarten door ready to learn, which we do again and again, but we have to do more than that. We have to get them, to perform, to be up to grade level in reading by 3rd grade. And then we have to, get them to do well on middle school achievement tests. And by the way, it's up to preschool to make sure kids graduate on time and so on and so forth. The analogy is really like we deliver a beautiful, healthy little seedling to the kindergarten teacher. And then that little seedling goes through K-12 education. It may get underwatered, it may get overwatered, it may thrive depending on what happens. And you'll end up with a beautiful tree, right? The problem, honestly, sort of being self-critical, is that those of us in preschool education love to take credit for the good outcomes at the end and don't want to be blamed. I honestly think if we can get children at the kindergarten door, ready to learn, excited about school, confident in their own abilities, preschool's done its job. We never ask the same question of 2nd grade classrooms. Pull out the 9 months of a 2nd grade classroom and hold it accountable for everything after that happens to a child. So that's my response to the fade out. But I am playing the fade out game. And actually, when we do find these lasting impacts, I find it amazing. I almost miraculous. So.
Well, and I think there's so much awareness, especially in Cleveland, but also in other communities, that it needs to be a strong transition across the whole early learning, all the way up through 3rd grade. And that's really what we're structuring as well. It's just the first foundational step.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, today we're enjoying a Friday Forum panel discussion on lessons from Tulsa, Oklahoma, preschool as a step toward lifelong success, featuring Dr. Rebecca Dorman, Director of Invest in Children, Katie Kelly, Executive Director of Pre-4CLE, and Dr. Deborah Phillips. She is a professor in the Department of Psychology at Georgetown University. We're about to head into the Q&A. We welcome questions from everyone, City Club members, guests, students. I noticed there were some from Solon High School here, or those of us joining via our radio broadcast, webcast, or our new live simulcast at the Parma Snow branch of the Cuyahoga County Public Library. If you'd like to tweet a question, you tweet it at the City Club. That's at the City Club, one word, and our staff will try to make sure to work it into the program. And now it's time to return to the panel for the traditional City Club question and answer period. We wanted to encourage you, as Dan Moulthrop said earlier, to make sure your questions are brief and to the point and are actually questions. Holding the microphones today are Director of Programming Stephanie Jansky and Content Associate Teddy Eisenberg. May we have the first question, please?
Good afternoon. I love the term, the first step on the path to success. And we all know that the very first step is prenatal health care. Governor Kasich just signed a bill into law that defunds Planned Parenthood. And that's where a lot of our low-income moms depend on Planned Parenthood for their prenatal care. So my question is, what impact does the lack of prenatal health care have on a child's ability to be successful in preschool?
Thank you for the question. Dr. Phillips? Prenatal care as being important?
It is the essential first step. As I said, development is cumulative. And you don't want to tie a child's hand behind his or her back before they even come into the world, right? There is, you could say fascinating, you could say alarming, now neuroscience evidence on what happens to brain development in the absence of healthy prenatal care and development. And it is very hard to recover from if a child is born already compromised in terms of that brain's ability to recruit the experiences that it's waiting for when the child is born to help it take the next step in brain growth and development. So it is crucial to have healthy prenatal care.
Next question, please. Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm Dr. Dearborn from the Case Western School of Medicine, and my question is to Dr. Phillips. The Cleveland area has neighborhoods where over 25% of the children are lead poisoned.
Yeah.
Are there programs, early childhood, that are targeted to the cognitive and executive function problems of these children?
Yeah. There is work. I would refer you to Dr. Betsy Lozoff at the University of Michigan. You probably know Betsy, right? Okay. She was on the Neurons to Neighborhoods group. She really is, I think, the premier person in this country who's looking at interventions for children who've experienced lead poisoning. Her, I have not looked at her most recent work, but what I know of it previously is that it's very difficult to undo the impacts of lead poisoning. Certainly not fully undoing the impacts of lead poisoning, but they focus very intensive cognitive interventions with these children. You may want to share more because you may know more about more recent evidence.
Just to point out, the CDC released a working group report last summer urging high-quality early childhood education for all of these children as a way to try to pull them up.
Yeah.
Dr. Dearborn just said that the CDC had released a paper urging that there be high-quality pre-K for just this population that have been affected by lead poisoning.
Right.
Thank you very much for that question and for the follow-up too. And before we take another question, I wanted you guys to weigh in on that on the local level. If we're talking about neighborhoods that are 25% of children who have elevated lead levels in their blood, and we're also talking about prenatal issues, what about those challenges? We talk about setting up a great pre-K program and opening seats, but what about making sure that you have kids that are ready for pre-K? And has that been a challenge, Dr. Dorman?
Well, yes, we've actually, and part of this is because of Dr. Dearborn, who works with Invest in Children, looked at specifically kids with elevated lead levels who come into the UPK classroom, and does our high-quality program catch them up? And unfortunately, the answer is no, it does not. So that's given us sort of marching orders that we need to do more, that it is simply not enough given the toxic insult that has happened to those brains. So we're working on that. It does, it's unfortunate that we have this natural experiment in Cleveland that, looking through all the kids who've been through UPK, we were able to find over 600 children to draw those conclusions. So it's not very happy news, I'm afraid.
Our next question, please.
Hi. Taking a step forward from Merle Johnson's comment on the prenatal care and working in the same time period as Dr. Dearborn's comments, I'd like to see more done and what is being done for the pre-K students, and specifically parent education and other education for the birth to 3-year-olds.
Okay. What about parent education?
What I can say is Invest in Children has a whole continuum from prenatal to kindergarten. UPK is certainly one part of that continuum, but number of home visiting programs that we directly support and others in the community that are working with families. So there is really a comprehensive continuum in place. It's still not reaching every family. We're working on that. But there are other programs, and I would say if a family is interested and is motivated, that they can access those services.
Thank you. All right, next question right in front.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for the work that you're doing, and thanking the providers and the funders that are here in this room for the incredible work that's being done here. So thank you. Recently, anecdotally, I've heard a number of stories about children who are being asked to leave preschools because they are disruptive and unruly. But on further inquiry, I gather sort of a cluster of behaviors that seem consistent with ADHD. So I'm wondering, Dr. Phillips, if there have been any research done on looking at those children in terms of assessments and perhaps early interventions that might have some positive outcomes, and if therapeutic environments, preschool environments, might be advantageous, or whether they should remain integrated into their existing schools.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, a very timely question, because as you know, the work on preschool expulsion is staggering. Children are something like, I don't know, 10 times more likely to be expelled from preschool than from anywhere along the K-12 spectrum. We know that one of the strongest predictors of preschool expulsion is the race and gender and special needs status of the child. And we also know that teachers who are under severe job stress because of working conditions and low salaries are significantly more likely to expel a child than a teacher who's not experiencing that kind of job stress. Children are most likely to get expelled because of behavioral issues. My feeling about that is that a high-quality preschool classroom and a high-quality preschool teacher should be a teacher who, has had the professional development and the education to know how to handle those behavioral problems. I mean, often they are problems of executive functioning. They are the child who forgets after they hang up their coat what to do next, and they look like a problem because they're wandering around the classroom, right, disobedient, whatever, and what is really happening with that child's struggling with executive functioning problems and needs scaffolding and support. So I take very much a kind of prevention attitude toward expulsion. High quality preschool is the best answer to expulsion, even though it's also the location where expulsion is happening a lot. I don't think these children need special programs. I think they need high quality preschool.
And we put a lot of focus in this community on those kinds of supports. The county actually, in addition to UPK, funds that kind of intensive coaching and technical assistance to make sure our teachers are keeping those kids in our classrooms.
The other really nice model, I'm sorry, just to chime in, is mental health consultation in preschool classrooms, where you have an expert to come in and kind of guide you through how to handle children who are more of a handful for whatever reason.
Rebecca?
And that is exactly what Katie was referring to. We actually, through Starting Point, which is our local resource and referral agency around all things child care, we have a wonderful special needs child care program and work with other community agencies, many of whom are in the room, who help with medical or developmental or behavioral issues. The other thing that has happened recently is the boy issue. Wired to Move is the book that Starting Point commissioned, and there's a lot of work and light being shown on the differences in little boys, and I'm the mother of 3 boys who were once little, in the classroom, and they just need to move.
Yep.
So, so I have to give a shout out to Starting Point on that.
All right, let's take another question, please.
How you doing? I'm Ulysses Stokes with Cleveland Neighborhood Progress. Dr. Phillips, thank you for being here. I wanted to ask a question about the third grade results. And looking at those third grade results, given that a lot of the preschools were in the public schools, did you see a relationship between the difference in the quality of schools that those preschoolers then enrolled in following preschool?
We have not had the opportunity yet to look at the quality of K-12 schools in Tulsa. We know they're highly variable, as they are everywhere. And we actually are in the process of seeking funding to follow a new cohort of preschoolers, now 10 years later than the kids you're looking at, and literally following them into elementary school. Because again, I think it was Katie who raised this issue of continuity of education and that bridge. It's often a bridge too far from preschool to elementary, and ensuring that children, when they leave preschool, are picked up by a kindergarten teacher and then a first grade teacher and a second grade teacher who knows what they have learned and kind of take them the next step in a very smooth fashion. So that's exactly what we want to look at next in Tulsa. Yeah, very important issue of K. I think early education is almost now, the question about preschool is what does happen in kindergarten and first grade. That's what we need to understand. Yeah.
Next question, please.
Hi, there was a mention earlier that 80% of the kids that go through UPK in Cleveland are ready for kindergarten, but I'm wondering about other ways that we measure like the impact of UPK and about pre-for-CLE in Cleveland. And
I want to mention UPK, I'm the acronym fighter, and I think we know this one, but Universal Pre-Kindergarten.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to get that out. It was
So,
bugging me.
Go first.
So we're actually looking at kindergarten readiness in a couple of ways. One is through a nationally recognized assessment called the Bracken Kindergarten Readiness Assessment, and that's where that 80% number comes from. That applies to UPK classrooms and also classrooms outside of universal pre-kindergarten. And so that's one way. We're also going to start tracking against the state's new kindergarten readiness assessment that is administered to every child entering a public school setting. It was just launched last year, which will look at a bunch of different domains of readiness, including social emotional, so getting to that executive function readiness, which will be really critical to seeing how we're getting our kids ready for our classrooms. And then Pre-for-CLE also looks at quality and access by each Cleveland neighborhood, because part of our goal is not just that it's available, but that it's easy for parents and families to find it wherever they are in the city. So we've done a lot of work to look at that and also to share that. So on our website we have a search function on preforcle.org where parents can go and easily find that information across the city and find the right choice for them. So it's important to us to look at that data as well.
I would just say our research is up on the Invest in Children website, but just to make the point that we do look pre and post to document the gains that the children make, and it really mirrors the results you've just seen, that the most disadvantaged children are making the biggest gains, but all children on average are making gains. So we feel very good about the impact that we're having.
Next question, please.
Thank you all so much for the work you're doing, and particularly for the clear way that you're explaining it. You'd almost think you guys had explained things to young children once. And I'm particularly grateful for the emphasis on teacher compensation and teacher quality. So you're doing great work in Cleveland and Cuyahoga County. I know that statewide, my organization, Policy Matters Ohio, has found that only 4% of Ohioans are enrolled in high-quality public pre-K compared to 30% in other states. Has the governor or anyone else from the state come to you and asked how we can bring this model statewide?
Well, we certainly have champions. Senator Peggy Lehner did a city club forum here last year and is a huge champion as the president or the chair of the education committee in the Senate. And we certainly have many others, in our own delegation here from Cuyahoga County is incredibly supportive. And in addition to our local city council and county council, and certainly Executive Armin Budish and Mayor Jackson. So we're very lucky in that regard. I think on the state level, it continues to be something that we're growing. Our big concern at the state level right now is funding quality. The state has its own quality system, and we need to get to the point where if you are at the highest level at a 5-star, the state is funding at that level, and anything that we can put on top of that at the local level to go beyond is really what we're able to do. So that movement is growing, and a huge part of that is so that we can attract and retain the highest quality teachers in early childhood, and that's got to be the priority, and that's what we're all working together to do. And it's a very large part of Pre-for-CLE's effort to bring resources to this community.
Rebecca Dorman, did you want to add to that at all as Paul's coming up?
I think she said it very well.
Okay.
Today at the City Club, we've been enjoying a Friday Forum panel discussion on lessons from Tulsa, Oklahoma, preschool as a step toward lifelong success. Special thanks to our table sponsors today, Cleveland Transformation Alliance, Cuyahoga Community College, Friends of the Cleveland Public Library, Friends of Sari Feldman, PNC, Pre-for-Clee, Starting Point, and the George Gund Foundation. Student participation from Solon High School and St. Martin de Porres High School was made possible by the Loeb Foundation. We thank all of you for your support. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And this forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.